Hello, Partho.
Hello, Kunal. How are you?
Welcome to the podcast on Dialogues on Self-Inquiry. We talked about Vedanta and how to certain practical aspects of Vedanta last time. Vedantis, we've been reading and inspired a lot by what Sri Aurobindo has written over his life. I would like to get into some of his writings. Some of the things that he's written which are like truly inspiring, and it takes maybe a lot of maturity, consciousness to understand even or comprehend parts of it, because it is just way too vast and way too deep. So I would like to talk about the life divine. Can you introduce our viewers to the core concept, what Sri Aurobindo has covered in the book, The Life Divine, and then we can dig deeper into some of the specific questions I may have. What is the book about? How did it come about? Any background context to it?
A context would be necessary.
Yeah. So the context. When did he write The Life Divine as an example, and what was he going through? How did he come up with the idea? What was the background context to the writing that came out?
I call it the intellectual phase that Sri Aurobindo went through. Not that he was an intellectual, but he was expressing his spiritual realizations, his yogic experiences and realizations intellectually for the mind of humanity. So the Life Divine is, I think, a foundational work of what we can call as philosophy. But then we know that Sri Aurobindo was never a philosopher to begin with, though he built up what we may call a philosophy. But he was a yogi. He was one who was engaged in the experiences and realizations of his yoga. And his yoga began with a lot of Vedanta and a lot of Tantra. He was a Shakta. Shakta means one who, a devotee of Shakti, was doing the sadhana for Shakti and with the aid of Shakti. So that's a Shakta. And he was a Vedanti. The foundational experiences of his life and yoga were Vedantic. And what finally built up as his, what finally evolved as Sri Aurobindo's yoga, blending, a harmonizing of Vedantic principles and practices with Tantric principles and practices. Though Sri Aurobindo himself, early years of his yogic life, fathomed the profoundest possible experiences of Vedanta. He realized the highest, the ultimate realizations. He came to the ultimate realizations of Vedanta quite early in his yogic life. If you're a yogi, you would be done with your yoga at that point. You've had the profoundest realization. You have the supreme realizations of Vedanta, the realization of the Supreme itself, and in its various aspects. After that, there's nothing left for you to do in human or in yogic terms. But Sri Aurobindo spent the rest of his life after that evolving a completely new yoga for humanity by practicing it himself and on himself. He was the living laboratory of a future yoga, a yoga that you cannot find in the traditional systems in India. If you go for the traditional Indian yogic systems, I think the summit that you can come to is the Vedanta. It gives you the realization of the infinite divine, Ananta Brahma, And once you have the realization, and here, yogically speaking, when you have the realization of Brahma, then you, in a manner of speaking, you become the Brahma. But these are not realizations that you have as an individual. You cannot have these realizations unless you have identified with what you're realizing. We call it knowledge by identity, not subjective, not subject object, not the usual human knowledge or experience. But you become that which you're experiencing, knowledge and realization by identity. When one says you realize, or he realized Brahma, he had become Brahma. That's how he realized Brahma. The realization of Brahma, the Ananta Brahma, was a self-becoming of Ananta Brahma. And when you become, when there's a self-becoming of Ananta Brahma, it's an all-comprehensive experience and realization. It's not that you realize only one aspect of Brahma. It's a self-becoming. So you realize all the aspects of Brahma, all the dimensions of the divine. So what would any yogi, any rishi need after that? Yet, it's not that Sri Aurobindo went beyond the experiences of Brahma. I mean, you can't go beyond Brahma anyway. Sri Aurobindo had experienced even the Parabrahma. Parabrahma is the Supreme Brahma. You can't go beyond that experience. But what Sri Aurobindo did was, he was the architect of a new human destiny, a new human future, an evolutionary human future. By his own yoga, by his own spiritual tapasya, he opened the passage for the human species, the human race, humanity, to go beyond its present evolutionary level and to reach for a perfection that was so far beyond human reach, except for some Maharishis and Mahayogis. And that too, they did it in the highest possible ranges of consciousness. Sri Aurobindo also realized it in the highest possible ranges of consciousness, but then he brought it down to earth plane. He brought that highest possible level of experience and realization. He called it the supermind, the supramental consciousness. And he brought it down to earth level and made it a possibility for the future human. So in that sense, his yoga was a next step, a next level, going beyond even what the Maharishis had established on earth, even what the previous avatars, including Sri Krishna, had established on earth. Those who want to understand what this yoga was, what is the supermind, what is this meaning of the phrase he brought down, etc., etc. The life divine is perhaps the foundational work. Sri Aurobindo himself has said that his yoga was, the phrase that he used is Vedantic in conception and Tantric in execution. In conception, the conceptual framework of his yoga is Vedanta. And the life divine is an articulation of that. It's completing Vedanta. I mean, if in a manner of speaking, I mean, Vedanta is complete in itself, but Vedanta also has to be completed in its realization on earth. One may realize Vedanta in the highest ranges of one's consciousness, which is good, which is wonderful. But for someone like Sri Aurobindo, it's not enough, because that realization has to be brought down to our human plane, to our human existence, our mundane life on earth. It has to be brought down to the human mind. It has to be brought down to the human life and the body itself, and into human society, the way we live together. This is an evolution. Everything has to be raised to that highest consciousness. So that is Sri Aurobindo's yoga. That was his ideal and his attempt and his struggle for humanity. And the life divine tells you what that was. It gives you, in an extremely lucid manner, the entire foundation of Sri Aurobindo's yoga from the philosophical standpoint. It's a monumental work of Vedanta and yoga, the Vedantic grounds upon which yoga is built. And it moves through the traditional yogas, the traditional Vedanta, subsumes all of that and raises it to the Aurobindian level, beyond the overmind. He writes about the overmind, he writes about the supermind. Then from the standpoint of the supermind, he revisits everything else and connects all the dots like a symphony. It's 1,001 notes, each distinct, rising up to a crescendo and all. The very summit of human thought. I don't think single written work, any shastra, is as comprehensive as the life divine. So it's a symphony of yoga, of Vedanta. It's a difficult work to read. Sri Aurobindo, even at the best of times, was very difficult to read. His English is very classical. Doesn't lend itself too easily to the modern mind, which is not used to that kind of language anymore. It has this fantastic height and breadth of language and expression. So it's in that sense, it's a classical work in itself, a sadhana for the mind. Not every mind can reach it, can read it and comprehend it. But well, it is there, and I consider the Shastra of Shastras.
In one of our previous conversations, I recall you saying at some stage that once you are in the process of, once you are doing your sadhana and you are experiencing observation and these things, you should not read much or give up the readings or other texts. Does reading Life Divine to your mind, can it still complement one's sadhana practice, or is it better that it's read intellectually?
So there are two different things. What I said about not reading was very specific to a particular stage of one's sadhana. But this has nothing to do with the Life Divine, of course. But reading has its own pitfalls for most human minds. If you want an intellectual, philosophical, intellectual appreciation of spiritual life, it's wonderful to read a book like The Life Divine. Monumental work of philosophy. And it's a living philosophy. It's not a thinker's philosophy, it's a doer's philosophy. It's someone who's doing the yoga and writing about it. If you are yourself on the path, and let's say your sadhana is at that stage where you need to have a silence in the mind, you need to be stable in your inner silence, and you need to see things for yourself, experience things for yourself, come to your own realization. Then for that phase of your sadhana, it's best to keep your mind without any influence of any written word. The Life Divine is a philosophy. Philosophy of Sri Aurobindo's yoga, which again in its own place is wonderful. But from a certain standpoint of sadhana, I feel it's better not to be reading. Reading, unless you read, the mother often used to say that the best way to reach Sri Aurobindo is with a silent mind. And I am completely there with mother in this. If you can read Sri Aurobindo's writings with a silent mind, it's a different experience altogether. Silent mind means you're not reading intellectually, you're not trying to understand intellectually, you're not retaining any of it intellectually, you're not keeping it to be able to talk about it later and to discuss it and all that intellectual thing about reading, none of that. But you read it with a silent mind and let the vibrations of what you're reading enter your brain and
Mind.
and mind. But not everyone can do that. So I've, in my own life and experience, I've come across so many people who know the life divine, fluently talk about the life divine, and I can see that there's so much noise that it's all intellectual, and you can't see things then. You can't see clearly because there's so much of mental knowledge that you have. When I say not to read, I'm talking more as a facilitator of a Vedantic process, and only to those who have come to me as students. I'm not making any general statement. Everyone is welcome to read what they want to read. But let's say if you as a student of self-realization, you have come to me as a teacher, then it's my business what I recommend for you. The teacher is supposed to know that.
Correct.
So as a teacher, I say don't read, then it's just that, don't read. And that includes everything. At one point I may tell you that, now you're ready to read the life divine, and I may tell you how to read the life divine. Of course, it's up to you whether you take it, but if you're my student, I would expect that you do. And then see for yourself. The best thing is always to do it and see for yourself. And if it works for you, fine. If it doesn't, just let it go. Even teachers and teachings, nothing is sacrosanct that way.
Sure.
So if it works for you, fine. So it was from that perspective that I had said it. So that has to be understood clearly.
Sure. So in Life Divine, one of the things Sri Aurobindo writes about, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, the mind at some point has to realize that mind is now the handicap, and for one to go beyond the mind, which is where the supermind and other potential...
So, absolutely. Says in one of his aphorisms, Sri Aurobindo writes, the mind was the helper and the mind is the bar.
Yeah.
So, of course, the intellect, the mind, reading even spiritual literature, they help you. And then they can become the barrier. See, you can read about the overmind, for instance. You can read about the supermind. My question always is, how much will the mind understand what it reads? Because it doesn't have a corresponding experience. The supermind is far removed from our experiences, from our real existence. And it's far, far removed. We haven't even got to the point of the intuitive mind or the spiritual mind, leave alone the overmind. And supermind is way beyond that. So my question is, even if you read about it, how much is the mind really understanding? How effective is its interpretation? Its interpretation finally is based on what it knows. Every mind understands what it reads on the basis of what it already knows and understands. You cannot understand something which is beyond the range of your understanding. I know it's a bit of a... If I'm reading about something which has no relation to my experiences, inner or outer, there's no corresponding experience or understanding or realization, mentally, intellectually, spiritually, any which way, then how am I going to interpret that? What am I going to understand of that? So I will only understand mentally. You see?
Up to a point.
I will read it mentally, I will only understand it mentally, which may not be the understanding at all. So Sri Aurobindo himself used to say, to understand the supermind and its workings, you have to have a different faculty, not the thinking rational mind that we live in. People like you and me, we are living in the thinking mind, the rational intellect. But we need to evolve a different faculty altogether. And we need to live in a much higher consciousness to be able to even begin to grasp the supermind and its workings. I mean, we can read about it, we can learn everything about it, we can talk about it, but it will be like a kid that has learned to recite the Vedas or the Gita Now there are lots of children, prodigies. They can recite the Gita or the Vedas. They understand nothing of it. So we can go on talking about it without understanding any of it. That is fine. But then, as sadhaks, do we really want to do that? So instead of giving all that time and energy and consciousness to this kind of reading, I would rather give that time, consciousness and energy to developing that faculty in me. Sri Aurobindo called it a Gnostic faculty. A faculty that can grasp the subtlest and the highest. A mind, raise the mind to higher levels of its consciousness. A mind that lives permanently in the spiritual consciousness, for instance. Only then it can reach out to the overmind and then to the supermind.
And that reminds me of one of Sri Aurobindo's sayings that nothing can ever be taught.
Yes,
you
of
have
course.
To experience it. You have
Nothing
to
can ever be taught. Yes. So how do you mean this? Like you cannot teach the life divine? Yeah.
I guess. And also to your point,
who's there to teach the life divine? You need a Sri Aurobindo to come and teach the life divine. Then Sri Aurobindo wouldn't teach you the life divine. He would probably tell you first just sit down and silence your mind or something. Or realize the psychic first. So at this moment, far, far more important than reading about the supermind and understanding it intellectually.
Just like rocket science or space or quantum physics, we don't understand because we don't experience at that scale or at that level. That's why it's harder for us to understand. As an analogy, in a manner of speaking.
Like something like quantum physics, you can still understand if you are...
Of course, but you need to really be...
mathematics of it.
Yes, you have to be intellectually quite evolved to get it. But
subtler intellect, yes.
But here we're talking like consciousness of another level or faculty of another level. So that's the analogy I was drawing in my head.
Consciousness of another level.
Yeah.
You're right, you're right.
It's like an ant or a small creature who's on the floor, 2 dimensions.
Yes.
Suddenly we raise it. Yes. And it starts realizing that what it felt was the life was, and the 2 dimensions.
Take it to a third dimension.
Take it to the 3rd dimension. How would it suddenly feel and be astonished that there's another dimension and all that? So that's like humans going beyond the 3 or whatever dimension.
Mental is like taking it to the next dimension.
Yeah. That's very helpful, Partho. Thanks a lot. We'll get back with some more thoughts and...
We can continue with Sri Aurobindo next time too.
Yes.
Sri Aurobindo is an ocean. Once you enter this ocean, there's no coming out.
Yeah. Some of the things I've tried to grasp, learn, experience, read from Sri Aurobindo shows me like not just him as a yogi or him as a tantric or him as a philosopher or him as a poet or him as with a brilliant sense of humor at stages. There are certain things and texts reflecting that. You're right, it's just the ocean, it's got everything. I don't know what's missing, there's just everything. And the mere fact that it's less known by masses about Sri Aurobindo, his writings and his works, is just a testimony that one needs to be ready for it. And then they will come to Sri Aurobindo.
Sri Aurobindo is not meant for popular consumption. I don't believe.
Correct.
Propagating Sri Aurobindo to the masses doesn't work.
Yeah.
There has to be a certain level of inner preparedness. For the masses, I always recommend Vedanta. Simple self-realization first.
Yeah.
I mean, even long before self-realization, at least a degree of separation from Prakriti, a degree of separation, degree of independence, mastery even. That's what's needed. That's what needs to be, disseminated everywhere. After that, Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo is you need a certain preparation for it.
So, Partho, thank you for this. Looking forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.